I'm Mary Fleming. My claim to fame is kids who draw it now. I'll start at the beginning, as far back as I can remember. I had 3 children in 2 years. So my older daughter was 2 when my twins were born, and she remembers too, but everyone's impressed by the art. But it was pretty chaotic. So I wasn't really paying attention, but the big way to keep them all occupied was I kept giving them pens and paper. And they would go to town, and I was happy because for a couple hours there was sanity in my house. And when I finally sent them to preschool, after about 2 or 3 months, the preschool teacher said, I need to talk to you, and I was a little nervous because the preschool teacher wants to talk to you. She said, are you aware that your son is drawing at a 6th grade level? And he was 4 at the time. And I said, no, I wasn't aware of that. I felt really dumb. I thought, because I'm a mother. Mothers have to know everything. And I said, no, I wasn't aware of that. And then I got nervous. I said, so what should I do? And she said, you better get him art lessons. And he's a twin. And so then, of course, if anybody's ever had twins, then all of a sudden I'm looking at his brother going, what's wrong with that one? Why doesn't he have any talent? But of course, then all of a sudden, once we started focusing on the art a little bit, they both started doing it. And I kept trying to find a teacher. I couldn't find a teacher. I was going everywhere. And finally, I found this woman at a local art league, and I came to her and I said, you know, could you teach my children? And I explained to her what they were doing, and she thought it was really nuts. She said that children that age couldn't be doing what I said they were doing. And she said, well, I'll give you a call. She took my number, kind of like, I'll call you later. And I kind of forgot about it for a while. And at the same time, the one boy who was the most fascinated with the art, I mean, he was always drawing all the time, getting a lot of attention for it. At night when we go to bed, he'd say, I'm so glad I remember my art. Thank you, God, that I remembered my art. And everyone else is praying for their relatives and grandma and grandpa. Yours was, thank you, God, that I remembered my art. And I thought that was sort of interesting. I sort of tucked it away. And then there's usually with children, there's the one big thing, kind of like the woman who said, where the child turned to her and said, you know, I'm your grandmother. You just do these things and you're not expecting. It sort of blows you away. So we were driving to get chicken because I didn't want to cook. I had all 3 kids in their car seats, and the week before we had gotten a goldfish at the carnival, and they don't last very long. It was gone pretty quick, and so we're driving, and the one boy says, is our goldfish going to have another life? And I said, you mean like a cat has 9 lives, that's just a saying? He said, no. Is our cat going to come back and have another life like people come back and have another life? And I'm driving in the dark thinking, what? Teaching this in Catholic CCD? And I said, well, what do you mean? And he said, is he going to come back and have another people life like people come back? And I said, well, who told you this? And then one of the other kids said, well, nobody told us. We just know. Don't you know? And I said, well, I don't know what I know. I'm trying to drive and trying to listen. And then they started talking in the dark in this car saying, and my older daughter, who always gets left out of this story because she doesn't draw, said, oh, I remember, it was really funny. My mom had red hair. And then the other one said, oh, I had a cat, and I loved my cat. And they started talking about all these past lives. And then one says, oh, my name was Lacey. That's really a silly name. And they were going on and describing all these past life things. And the one, of course, kept saying, but I love my art. That's all he doesn't care about people, I guess. But so we got home, and I told my husband, he said, you have to write this down. And I wrote it down, and I kind of didn't really pursue it because I was freaked. Didn't really know what it meant. And then the art thing kept continuing, and we finally found a teacher, the same teacher. She said, your children can come one time, and then I'll let you know if I'm going to take them. And she also was blown away by the things they were doing. All 3 of them went together. And basically, I'll show you a little bit about the art. This one is the one Michael made when he was 5, before he had any art lessons at all. Just sat down. It's a really cheapo paper because that's what we had then. I had it framed just so it wouldn't disintegrate.
5.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
This is Michael also. It's, you can see Spider, I'm sure you recognize it.
Can you hold it up?
You see it? This is also when he was 5, and this is after like 2 art lessons with the woman that we finally found. And this story is kind of funny if you're a parent. She sent us home after the first day and said, put a banana and orange on the table and have them sketch it and use shading and everything. So I put the banana and the orange on the table, and all the other 2 of the kids started drawing the banana and the orange, and this one started doing this drawing. And I was upset because it wasn't a banana and orange, it wasn't doing homework. He said, this is what I have to draw. You see, it's a jail looking from the inside out. And he just kept saying, this is what I have to draw, not a banana. So,
5 years old?
5 years old.
Oh,
Yeah. And so anyway, that is the art thing, and they got a lot of attention for it. I think for me, it really shook me up, and I think what's most wonderful about, it doesn't even matter that they were good artists. It came a time in my life where I was feeling not that great, I was feeling really down, I wasn't feeling spiritually connected, and it was like a slap in the face to me, like, wake up, the world isn't what you think it is, it's much larger than the small, scared. Somebody said choosing from fear, you know, at the end of your life, it was like a wake-up call from the universe for me, being delivered by my children in this amazing way. And what ended up happening in my life is that after that, I got connected to spiritual people. Carol Bowman, this is the book that we were talking about. Carol Bowman does research in children's past lives. This is kind of like the book. You can get it pretty much at any bookstore on Amazon. But if you want to get the hardcover copy, the paperback is pretty small print. The hardcover copy she's selling on her website. If you type in Carol Bowman, it'll pop up. But they did a really limited run because it's really interesting. I think it was Valentine Publishing. The guy who started it was 90, and he wanted this book to be published so bad, and he took charge of it, and he talked to Carol, and he passed away. I'm not sure if it was right before or right after the book got published, and they published a really short run because they said nobody's really going to be interested in this. It's not scandalous enough or something.
What's the name?
Children's Past Lives. So, and I'll leave it up here if you want to come look at it. The other thing about the art talent that was really, for me, is both children, the things that they drew were so adult in nature, and the way they talked about art and the way they felt about it. One of them drew a picture of his birth. One of the twins, they're like, there were no cameras there. How could he have seen? He had all the details right. He had like the lighting, you know, the doctors, how they were dressed. It was really wild. And just a little pen and ink on the back of a scratch paper. We have all these scratch papers all over my house with these amazing drawings on them. At church, I told them if the only way I could keep them sitting in the seats at church was I could give them pens and paper and so you can draw in church. And they draw these, one in particular would draw very ornate crucifixes, like kind of they look really Middle Ages. I'm like, we have the more modern cross at our church, and he's drawing these really elaborate crucifixes. And so that's just what I wanted to draw today. I mean, it was very, everything they said and did was so matter of fact. I think that's what makes it startling. And like I said, I think it was, for me, a wake-up call. Then when other people started getting interested, and Carol, I wrote my story for Carol, we ended up being in her book, and that was a little bit of a whirlwind ride. I mean, a little bit too much for me. I'm not, I was afraid people would think we were strange or whatever, but it was a fun ride. It's fun to be on Oprah, they do your makeup and hair. Like that. And not much came of it after that, and then I had another baby, and so things just kind of, life went on. My sons right now are 21, they're studying art at University of Illinois, they're graduating in May. They've done lots of different things. They've already, I mean, when they were 19, they did a mural at a local cafe in our town, a complete historical mural. It's like 10 feet by 5 feet. And it's just people come, they're still getting all kinds of attention for their work. They're kind of ho-hum about it, and I think somebody over here mentioned their 17-year-old. They're kind of embarrassed that I'm still talking about it, and why don't I just let it rest? You know, I said, you don't understand what it, to me it was like, well, where could this come from? It's real easy to discount someone else's memory, but how do you discount a 4-year-old doing, or 5-year-old doing drawings like this? It's harder to discount it and say there's nothing beyond what we're experiencing right now. One thing I didn't talk about last time, which my daughter said it was okay for me to talk about it, but my youngest daughter, I have 4 children altogether, when she was born, all the other kids had real light, past lives were great and wasn't it fun, and she, from the time she started talking, had really scary, upsetting past life things, a lot of phobias, and it was really kind of distressing because I didn't really know quite what to do about it at that point in time. And the most reoccurring thing was about age 3, she started, every time she'd go to bed, she'd say, who's going to bury me when I die? And I'm like, okay, it's time to go to bed. And she'd have this long thing. Who's going to bury me? I'll bury you if you die. You're too old, you'll be dead. She'd go through everyone in our family, because she's the youngest. She'd say, you know, I said, well, Alan will bury you. He's older than me. And so then her brother would have to come in and say, my children will bury you when you die. And then she'd go to sleep. And it was just like, we were just joking about it after a while, thinking, what did a 3-year-old know about being buried when you're dead? And finally I called Carol and I said, okay, we don't have any art talent right now on this, but what do I do about this? Because I knew, I suspected it was a past life thing, and she really talked me through how to handle it. And I went back to my daughter the next night and I said, we did a relaxation thing, and I said, why don't you go back to the time that you started worrying about, you know, being buried, or, you know, not being buried. And she, like this, went back and she said, well, it's from that time when I was a soldier, and my name was Sparky, and I was killed in battle, and my friends didn't even bury me, they just ran away, and she was going on and on. And it's so odd to hear a 3-year-old talking, you know, about, number one, Sparky. I mean, nobody's name is Sparky nowadays. It's not a common nickname, but it used to be a common nickname. And so what we did was we kind of did a little visualization. We buried Sparky and put flowers on his grave and said, you know, I don't even know what I said, what do you want to say? She said a little something, and she never brought it up again. But she still remembers it. But it wasn't this every night thing where she had this phobia about even going to sleep. And it was gone. And I think that was a real eye-opener for me, because as a parent, before you're aware of the fact of past lives, I mean, you hear about it, but it's different to read about it and have it in your face in your family. To have that information that if your children are having struggles, there might be a component you're not aware of. I mean, who wouldn't want to know that? You don't want your child to continue to be suffering, you know, for fear of water or fear of heights or some other thing when you could maybe fix it and make it better. And for me, that was, it was really nice for Carol to be able to walk me through that and help her, because she was having a hard time and we weren't going to sleep when we were supposed to. So, and the only other thing I kind of wanted to talk about is, as I mentioned, this experience, the initial experience, started me on my spiritual path, and eventually I became a healer. I have a healing practice. I was teaching for a while at massage school. I do talks around the area. But what was really important was how I was able to transfer everything that was happening with them into evolving myself. And I think lots of times in our culture especially, we assume children are this blank slate that we're going to draw on and fill their heads with knowledge. And I think when you come to an understanding that your child is much more than just your child, you treat them differently. You have a new respect. You treat them like you treat any other human being. If they have a talent, you want to help them support it. You don't, it just changes, for me, it really changes the relationship between me and my children. And even now today, I feel like I was given a treasure to take care of and help them become whatever they're supposed to be, that's my job. And if I don't do that, karmic payback is real. You know what I mean? Anyhow, I think just knowing that would help so many people to be better parents and more, I know, it would expanded my idea of what it means to really be a parent. So that's all I think I have to say for now. And Billy, just,
Okay.
Diane, you want me to just?
You can ask.
Okay. We're going to have questions at the end, or
Yeah.
for both of us at the end?
For both of us,
Great.
yeah.
Okay, who's going to tell you this?
I'm gonna need some luck with that. Hearing you guys' stories, I don't know why I'm not sitting out there with y'all.
Billy Luke.
My name's Billy Luke. I'm assuming that nobody here has ever heard my story before except for Diane and Mary, because I told the story about 5 years ago. I think Diane found my number in the bottom of an old purse somewhere. So I'm running out of people to talk. You want to come back? I tell my wife all the time that there's probably nothing more tragic. I could not imagine anything more tragic than to lose a child, especially a young child. This story sometimes it kind of chokes me up to tell the story, but this story started long before I ever met my wife. My wife had a previous marriage. She got hold of me, and I just celebrated my 20th anniversary last month. So before we were married, she was married before, and she had a son. And it's going to take me a minute, but I was never saying get up here, because I've told the story 1,000 times. She had a son, and when he was 2 years old, he was diagnosed with neuroblastoma. And for anybody that doesn't know what that is, that's almost a death sentence right there. It's a childhood cancer. It's almost always deadly. And I didn't know my wife at the time. And when he died when he was 2. When he died, she was pregnant with another child. The day he died, she was pregnant. So that child became my stepdaughter years later, and of course I knew what was going on from meeting her and dating. We dated about a year. And let me step back a second here. I'm from Texas. You couldn't tell. And I got up here, the way I ended up in Chicago is I joined the Navy. Back in '85, I joined the Navy. I met my wife. It was my wife now. I met her when I was up here. She was born in Kentucky, so it's kind of bizarre that we met in Chicago together. And we dated about a year, and I got news that I'm shipping out. I said, well, I've been dating this girl for about a year. I either got to take her with me and marry her, or I ain't never going to see her again. So I went ahead and asked her to marry me, and she said, sure. So we took off from here. I actually met her here in Chicago. We left and went to California. Spent 5 years in San Diego while I was on a ship. Had our first son out in California. I got an older son that's 19 now. And I have a son that's 14, which is the one the story's a lot about. And I have another daughter that's 12. So why I just skipped one son and went to another son is beyond me. But when she got pregnant with my second son, it wasn't a very good pregnancy. Things were just kind of bizarre. To tell part of the story of what happened, she was pregnant. She was about 12 weeks pregnant. She went for her first sonogram. Well, I'd already had a son. I've already been through all this. So we go into the sonogram room, and the radiologist comes in, puts the sonogram on her, and he said, well, look at there, you're having twins. I'm like, wow, having twins. And he goes, well, wait a minute, something ain't right. I said, what's not right? He goes, well, I don't know. This was just a technician. He said, let me go get the doctor to come take a look at this for you. The doctor comes back in, takes a look at it. Me and my wife are sitting there kind of dumbfounded about what's going on. And the doctor looked at us and he said, well, ain't no way to tell you this, but you got twins there, and I've seen sonograms, we've never seen one. If you've seen a few of them, you can kind of read them, you know? And I can see the two babies there, and he said, one of them just don't got a heartbeat. And I'm kind of dumbfounded. I looked at him and said, well, what are you going to do with it? How are you going to fix that? And that's exactly what I told him. I said, well, how are you going to fix that? He said, well, I ain't going to fix that. He goes, if we're lucky, the other one will be fine. So that was kind of a shock to me, and we went on, and the pregnancy went okay until the delivery date. Get to the delivery date, she's going into labor, so we run to the emergency room and get in there, and the doctor started checking her out, and they said, well, we can't find the baby's heartbeat. I said, don't tell me this, the baby was just fine last night. I seen him kicking plates off her stomach and everything else. And my wife's just panicking, she's just freaking out. I'm like, no, he'll be fine, trust me. So the next thing I know, they knocked her out, ran her right into an emergency C-section. You step back a little bit when James, my son now is named Chad. James is the son that died when he was 2, my stepson, my daughter's earlier son. Neuroblastoma really messed him up really bad. He only lived 6 months from the time he was diagnosed. I kind of get ahead of myself because I've told the story so many times. He had a scar in his neck from the intravenous chemotherapy that they put him through. They just did it right through his neck all the time. Am I holding this mic close enough?
Yeah.
Okay, because I can't hear myself. It's kind of weird. He ended up having a tumor over his left eye that really devastated his eye on the left side. And he had a tumor on the left side of his head over here when he died. This is all stuff I never saw, but you know, I've heard the story enough being married to my wife. And that devastated my wife. I mean, he was 2 years old and gone. And there she is pregnant with another kid. Now, how do you deal with losing one when you're already fixing to have another one? Well, and then she got beyond that and decided to marry me, and we got to moved back where I was at before. We got to the birth date of my second son, and their doctors are telling her, he don't have a heartbeat. We got to go do an emergency C-section. We've lost his heartbeat. That's the last thing my wife heard. So they take him in, take her in, and they get him out, and he's fine. They get to the nursery there, and the pediatrician comes over, and I'm standing there, and they're looking at him. The pediatrician said, well, he looks all right. I'm like, yeah, he looks all right. I said, what's wrong with his eye? And she said, well, I didn't notice anything. We looked at his eye on his left eye is totally white. No, it's just white, like somebody flipped your eyeball around. It's just a white eye there. There's no color, no nothing, just a white eye. And I got to looking at him, I looked over and he had a scar on his neck, right there on the left side, right there. And he also had a knot on the left side of his head. And the doctor looked at him, I said, what's that scar doing on his neck? I said, he was only born about 10 minutes ago. He said, how do you get scars already? And she said, I don't know. I said, what's wrong with his eyes? She said, I don't know, I've never seen that either. She goes, I've never seen that. And I'm like, she said, well, he can't see out of it. There ain't nothing there to see out of. I said, well, he's got 5 fingers and toes on each hand and foot. I said, well, if that's all that's wrong with him is he can't see out of one eye, I said, I can live with that. So, of course, my wife, the last thing she heard going into surgery was, he don't got a heartbeat. So when you know how doctors are, we go into the room and bring my wife out of recovery, bring her into the hospital room, and the doctor said, first thing out of his mouth when she was awake, he looked at me and said, did you tell her yet? I'm like, I thought my wife was going to come unglued. She thought she done lost her second kid. I said, it's all right, honey, he's only blind. I didn't know what else to say. I said, he's alive, he's just blind in one eye. What do you say to somebody that thinks their kid died? He's alive, he just can't see. She's like, what? I said, well, I don't know what's going on. I said, I was in the nurse with him. The doctor's not paying no attention. I was sure he ain't got no eye on one side. I said, he's got a scar on his neck and a lump on his head. She looked at me like I was crazy. Because she knew how James ended. Of course, I had heard the story long before that, too. She goes, you don't see what's going on, do you? I said, what? She goes, you know what that scar on his neck is? I said, well, he was just born an hour ago now. What could he possibly have done already? He said, that's the same exact scar in the same spot James had. And she said that thing on his eye, she goes, James had this massive tumor in the back of his left eye that just devastated his vision. We took Chad with his eye, we took him to the top medical experts in child pediatricians in the whole state of Illinois. We not once ever got a single explanation of what was wrong with his eye. Never. To this day. He's 14 now. We still don't have an explanation of what was wrong with his eye. Eventually, though, it was probably, I guess it was probably 2 or 3 months. The eyes just like faded away. The white just faded off his eye. And it looked just like the other eye. But even to this day, you can look at it, and if you look at somebody's eyes real close, they're just a perfect circle. Like the lower part of his left eye, it's like faded, a white faded line right there. He don't have a perfect eye on his left side, but he's still blind in his left eye. And he can't see anything. My wife used to get upset about that. Well, he can't see. I'm like, honey, if he could never see it, he don't know what he's missing anyway, so why don't you feel sorry for him? You know, that's people, handicapped people, if you never had it, you don't know what you're missing anyway. She's like, well, he can't see out his left side. I said, well, he never could, so he don't know the difference, so he learns to adapt. Then, everything was okay with him. I mean, he was healthy, other than he couldn't see, and we didn't know exactly how that was going to affect him. And one day, I mean, real young. I don't know how old the kids now, they started talking, 2, 3 years old. He was real young, like 3. And he told my wife, he said, why'd you leave me? My wife's like, why'd I leave you? She said, I ain't worked since I've been married and I'm raised. You're like the 3rd kid. She said, I didn't work because my wife, I made enough where we didn't make enough, but I got by where she didn't have to work. She stayed home and raised the kids. He said, what do you mean, why'd I leave you? He said, well, where are my toys at? And she said, what toys? And he said, well, my little stuff this and my little stuff that. And, well, she about hit the floor. He was talking about James's toys. Told her exactly where they lived, exactly the park they used to go play at, and all the toys he had left behind. She didn't know what to say. And that was kind of the bizarre thing that I had to deal with her, is how do you accept the tragedy of losing one son, but then all of a sudden there he is again. And I'm like, where am I in this picture? Because he actually had a hatred toward me for a long time until we got beyond this, because he had other experiences with her. He has been with her throughout many lives. He came to us one night and said, told my wife, now this one, he was young enough, you could have asked him what state he lived in, he wouldn't have had a clue. I mean, that's how young he was. He barely talked. Told my wife, said, you remember that blue dress I bought you? My wife said, what blue dress? Back when we flew to Hawaii? Don't you remember us sitting on the beach having those cocktails together? And this is from a kid that don't even know Hawaii's a state or that you had to fly to get there. He knew what a lei was. And he's looking at me like, what are you doing here? And the funny thing about Chad was that when he would have these experiences, that ain't Chad, that ain't my kid. He don't act like that. I mean, he had, like the one I heard earlier, totally different look on his face. He is totally serious. And he would get mad if you didn't know what he was talking about. This was going on, I mean, one story after another for a long time. And he's not just reincarnated. He has, I don't know how to explain it. He sees people, he hears people, mostly from my wife's family. My wife's had a devastating life. She's lost all of her parents, all of her grandparents, everybody in her family's died since we've been married, and I ain't lost nobody. All my grandparents are still alive, so I don't know how she deals with it. But my son tells her, it's okay, I just talked to Grandma the other day. She said, don't worry about it. Everything's fine. Things are going on still today in my house. It's hard to explain him unless you know him or live with him. He's a loner. And he seems to be perfectly content to be left alone. But you know he's not alone, because he is always telling you he saw this or saw that. When I walked in this morning, Diana reminded me of a story I told 5 years ago. My son, when he was real little, I'll give you more little background about me. My father and my grandfather were both professional cowboys in Texas. When I grew up, When I grew up, my grandfather died when I was 7. That's what ended my dad's rodeo career. And when I got older, I started riding bulls and riding bareback, got into the whole rodeo thing, riding horses. I've been riding horses before I even walked, because that was just the way life was back then. Well, for whatever reason, my son, he was into watching rodeo on TV, because living up here in Illinois, you don't see too many rodeos up here. I see a couple every year. And now at this age, my 19-year-old son just started bull riding last year. It's just an addiction, I guess. But my little son that the story's about, he used to sit down with me and we used to watch rodeo on TV all the time. My son had always asked me about his grandfather and his great-grandfather, who were professional cowboys. And he, from circumstances beyond my laziness or lack of funds to get there, he's never met my grandfather. Or my dad, his grandfather, that used to be a cowboy. And he used to ask me about him all the time. And we'd watch rodeos and I'd say, well, that's what Grandpa Bill used to do. And my dad was a bulldogger, steer wrestler. And I went to bed one night, this is the most profound thing. You talk about out-of-body experience. I don't know if I've ever had one, but if I haven't, this is close if I've ever got one. I went to bed one night, not thinking nothing about anything. Have you ever had those dreams where you wake up and have a dream? I'm like, what would I be dreaming about that for? It never has crossed my mind in years. Why would I even think about that? When I was a little kid, my grandfather rodeoed, or my dad and my grandfather, they rodeoed from the time I was, well, when I was born, they were rodeoing. So they rodeoed from the time I was born until I was 7 years old. I went to 2 or 3 rodeos a week. Every week, same story. I sat right next to the gate, watched my dad rodeo. As soon as he was done, we left. Bull riding used to be my favorite thing. I just had to beg my dad to stay so I could watch the bull riding. He said, nope, we got to go home. I got to get to work in the morning. So I went to bed one night having this dream. I woke up in the dream, but the dream was I was standing there, and I just kind of woke up, and I looked up, and there's my dad rodeoing right in front of me, just like I was a little kid again. And the first thing that came to my mind, even in the dream, I said, what am I seeing this for? I lived this when I was a kid. I said, I have no interest in seeing this again. I looked over, and there's Chad standing next to me in my dream. Now, you got to remember that I was never older than 7 when I experienced this. But in my dream, I was a grown man just like I am now, sitting there watching my dad and my grandfather rodeo together. And I looked over, and there's Chad standing there next to me, just this big smile on his face. Just watching what was going on. I woke up in that dream. That was the most bizarre experience I've ever had in my life. I just couldn't get it out of my head. I said, something was going on. I said, there's a reason that I had that dream. I told my wife about it, and I said, I'm not going to tell Chad I had this dream just yet. I said, I got to figure this out. I said, I don't know what's going on, but I said, he had something to do with it. Now remember, I told you Chad ain't never met my dad, never met his grandfather. My dad's still alive. He lives in Texas, still raises horses, raises cattle. About 2 weeks go by after I had this dream. I couldn't get it out of my head. I thought about it every waking moment. I said, something wasn't right. I said, honey, I don't know how he did it. He wanted to see it, so he found a way to see it. We're sitting there watching a rodeo one night, and it was just me and him in the living room. And I just thought about it, just dawned on me. I said, now's a good time to ask him. I said, hey, Chad, because you could just talk to him about anything. If he's not in that frame of mind, he'd act like he don't know what you're talking about. He sees spirits, he sees ghosts, he's had these experiences being his brother. And if he's not in that frame of mind, he'll just, what are you talking about? But so I thought this would be a good time. We're watching this rodeo. I said, hey, Chad. And he's sitting down in front of the TV. I'm sitting back here in the back of the room. I said, hey, Chad. He's like, yeah, what's up? I said, you ever seen Grandpa Bill rodeo? Of course, I knew he never even met him, much less seen him rodeo. Chad just looks at me and kind of grins and goes, yeah, just once. And I said, all right. I didn't say anything. I said, I let a few minutes go by. I said, did you say you saw Grandpa Bill rodeo once? He goes, yeah. And he's still kind of grinning, got this funny little grin on his face. I said, where'd you see that at? He goes, well, I knew there was only one way to get there, and that's through you. So he said, I come and got you in your dream and had you take me back. Honest to God, freaked me out. That right there told me something was going on with this kid. Another story about Chad, we were sitting one day and he comes up and he goes, he told my wife, like I said, our family's all died pretty tragically. She lost her stepdad, her dad, and her mom all in 4 months. Her grandmother died, and they were real close, because she was raised a lot around her grandparents. And right after her grandma died, they went down to Kentucky to the funeral, and they're in a hotel room there, and Chad looked at my mom and said, "It's gonna be all right now." She looked at Chad and said, "How you know?" I said, "Well, Grandma just came through and told me." She said, "You don't have anything to worry about." They came back from the funeral about a month later. Chad was sitting there in the living room watching TV with my wife one night, and he said, "I was sitting here watching TV last night, and Grandma was over in the hallway standing there." And she asked me if, he said, this is his story. He said, "Well, so I seen her standing there, so I told her, come on over, and she asked me if she wanted me to wake you up," talking about my wife, because my wife fell asleep watching TV with him. And he said, "No." And she said, "I'll wake her up if you want me to." And Grandma said, "No." Said, "Do you mind if I sit by her?" Chad Walsh said, "No, she's right there, go ahead." And he just kept on watching TV. He is so nonchalant. I had to explain to him that everybody don't do what you do, son. Everybody don't see what you see, and everybody ain't been through what you've been through. Just last week, as a matter of fact, we're walking in the house, me and him had gone wherever, coming through the house. I had a big entertainment center right here against the walls. I come in the door and walk past the entertainment center. He's about 2 steps behind me. My wife collects these angels, all kinds of angel statues all over my house. This angel flew off the entertainment center in front of him, smashed all over my brand new wood floor I just put in. Chad said, wonder if somebody's trying to get in touch with me. He goes to bed that night. Next day, his remote control flies off the TV, hits him in the head while he's in bed. So I told him, I said, "You gonna have a talk with him, or what are we gonna do about this?" That was just the last week. He came out of the basement one time. I'll never forget this story. His older brother, 6 years older than him, he come up laughing his butt off one day. He come out of the basement. He said, Mom, Dad," said, "you're not gonna believe this." And I said, "What are you laughing about?" He goes, "Josh never saw it." He said, "I'm laughing at Josh, his older brother." I said, "Well, what's so funny?" He said, "Well, these 3 spirits walked right through Josh, and he never even knew they was in the basement." I'm like, "What?" He said, "They've been down there for I don't know how long ago. I see him all the time." He goes, "I thought Josh would have seen them when they walked right through him." So the way we found Carol is another story altogether. I told Diane this earlier today. I said it's weird the way things come together. And Diane, I was listening to an author on the radio, just talking about a book. To this day, I don't remember what the book is now. It wasn't that important. I went on to my wife and I said, "I want you to go get me this book I heard about," because she goes to the bookstore all the time. I said, "Give me this book." I said, "I want to read it." I said, "It sounds pretty interesting." She goes and to the bookstore, finds the book, and we've been living this thing with Chad for years now. You know, it's like every day something's going on. And right next to this book that I wanted is Carol's book. We had never heard anything about children's past lives experiences. We just thought we were, I don't know if we thought we were one of a kind or what we were going through, but we never discouraged him from talking or having any, we just let him talk, to say whatever he wanted to say. And picked up this book of Carol's. My wife brought it home. I guess she read it for us. She told me she gave it to me, because once you close the book, she goes, "You got to read this." She goes, "You got to read this." So I picked it up. I said, "Well, that's pretty interesting." I read the cover, children's past life experience. And I said, "Well, okay, I'll give it a shot." I read the book. I got to the last page, closed the book. I said, "She living here somewhere I don't know about?" If you have not read Carol's book, that's one of the most amazing things. I thought she wrote that book living in my living room. It sounded like the exact same things I'd gone through. And Carol's book was her email address or something to get hold of her. We called her and said, "Carol, you got to come check this out. You think you got a story, man, if I got one." Next thing I know, we were in touch with Carol for a year. It's been, well, Chad's 14 now, so this all started back when he was 2 or 3. It's been 12 years or so. He got hold of Carol, and I don't know if any of y'all know Dr. Stevens or Dr. Tucker. They're like world-renowned, going all over the world studying these cases. Yes. And he gave us a call. He said, "We need to check this out." I said, "Come on down, you guys see this." He said, "I can't believe it. I was growing up raised in a Baptist church, just Christian, believing God, had an open mind. my wife we'd be like, she'd say, what do you think about this mess? I'm like, I don't know. It is what it is, I guess. How can you deny it? I mean, it's right there in front of you. Well, my wife, was going through the torture of losing a 2-year-old. And then I'd have to tell her, how can you be so sad anymore when he's standing right there? I mean, it's hard to deny that that's him. I mean, he's even told you that's him. He looks just like him. You took the pictures of him, of James when he died, and take pictures of Chad, put them side by side, you almost can't tell them apart. I never even knew James. The exact same look on their face, the exact same everything. I'm like, oh my God. Hey, Dr. Stevens, come down here. You got to see this. He was done with his study. Actually, they came to my house twice. I actually got the chance to meet Carol in person. She came after Dr. Stevens came the first time, and Dr. Tucker. They wanted to come back the second time. I said, well, if y'all come back again, why don't you tell Carolyn coming down with you? So we'd like to meet her. We talked to her. It's like somebody you meet on the phone all the time. You never get a chance to meet her. Like, I've read your books. Can I at least meet you? She said, yeah, I'll come down. So they came down, spent the day with us. They came. Dr. Tucker and Dr. Stevens, now they have traveled the world. They spend most of their time in third world countries. That's where this is a lot more prevalent or more accepted in third world countries that people having past life experiences. So it wasn't as common back then in the United States. Chad has been written about. He's in Carol's second book. Back then they wanted us, Dr. Stevens, Dr. Tucker wanted us to go on 48 Hours prime time, Oprah. They wanted us to go on all these news shows. At that time, I say, even now today, I'm like, Chad is still too young to try to deal with this, in the public eye. And I didn't want to force it upon him or anything like that. And that's when Carol met Diane years ago and said, would you at least come speak about it to a small group? I said, well, yeah, I'd talk to anybody in person who wants to talk about it. I'm not going to go on national TV about it. They came down a second time and came to the conclusion he'd been written about in the American Medical Journal. Dr. Stevens wrote in and wrote articles on him in the American Medical Journal about his case study. And Chad has been, he kind of named him like the most conclusive, absolutely most conclusive case of reincarnation within a family in the entire United States. Through physical evidence, and they went through everything. They even went all the way back to James' medical records and compared them to Chad's medical records, and were just astounded. I'm like, well, you ought to live here. I feel like the outsider. Like my wife says, she goes, this is mine. Chad's story, what are you doing telling? I'm like, yeah, feel free to take the mic. Just step right up anytime you want. My wife ain't about to take that deal. But I've had a lot of experiences with Chad throughout the years, and we've gotten beyond the part where it took him a while to get over the fact that he thought I was taking his wife away from him. It really did. He hated me for a while. He had to come to the understanding that, let me go back a step here. Dr. Stevens, Dr. Tucker, and Carol finally explained it to us in a better way that you might understand it. He's had several past life experiences. His problem today is, or at that time, he didn't know where one started and where one ended. To him, it was one continuum thing. Today, if you speak to him about somebody dying, he's like, oh, so? Big deal. He has no concern. He don't care. He's like, they'll be back. Another tragic story about my wife's family. Her stepfather and her mother were married, lived in Arizona. He left the house, told his wife, I'm going to go about 2 blocks down the street to the gas station, get a gallon of milk, I'll be right back. He went about a block, went across the street, got hit by a car, killed him instantly. At the time that happened, my wife's dad, her real dad, lived in Kentucky, had already been diagnosed with brain cancer. He lived a year after that. When my wife's stepdad died in Arizona, I called her mom. I said, look, if you want to come back up here, I said, you got nobody in Arizona. I said, you want to come back? I'll fly down and have you come back. She said, okay. I flew to Arizona to pick her up, put everything she owned in a U-Haul, drove her back up here so she could spend time with her daughter, and within 9 months she died. She didn't want to live. She knew, she even told us, she said, I got nothing here anymore. I got to go find my husband that she'd been married to for over 25 years. Chad, in his infinite wisdom of the world, went to my wife the day before my wife's mom died to tell her not to worry, because he knew for a fact that today was Grandma's last day because Grandma's mom was coming to get her. He has a connection that's beyond anything I can grasp. And nobody in my family's ever died, so I don't know if I'll get any info out of him or not. But he is continually coming up with things like this that are just beyond the beyond. He thinks nothing of it. He thinks if there's a whole room full of ghosts, it's like me standing here in front of y'all. He don't care. He goes on about his business. We had to talk to Carol about it. Carol, I got 3 ghosts in the basement. They're walking through my oldest son, and Chad thinks it's funny. Carol said, well, tell him to go downstairs and hang out in the basement until he sees him again, and then tell him to go on out. They're done with him. Just go toward the light or do something. So we had to tell Chad, we sat him down and said, look, you don't want to see him down there, and you're kind of special, more special than we are. Said, you're going to have to go down there, and you're going to tell them to go on about their business. They're done here. Their time here is over. Just go on. And he did. And I said, are they gone? He goes, well, I ain't seen them anymore. They must be. So I asked him after this incident in the living room the other day about the statues breaking and stuff. I asked him yesterday, I said, did you get rid of that one? He just laughs and goes, I guess, I don't know. My wife to this day says every time he steps out of school, walking to the truck, get in a truck, solo around, he's just walking, laughing and talking. He gets in the truck and says, who was you talking to? Nobody. He won't even come out of his room unless you beg him to or try to feed him. That's the only time he comes out. He's a real loner. He just tends to be happy to be left alone all the time. And it's hard to believe that he's actually really alone all the time because he's a different kind of kid. You would have to just get to know him to understand what he's gone through and what he sees and how he deals with things. And to him, death is, you could tell him somebody died, he's okay with that. He's like, that's not that big a deal. That's not a bad thing. Just because you died, it's not a bad thing. He just don't see that as a bad thing. So I can't help but look at him and feel like my life has totally changed to be a part of his, to get his understanding of things, to see how somebody else sees it that's not afraid of anything like that. It's just kind of overwhelming sometimes. But he's gone through a lot, and he thinks nothing of it. I told him today what I was coming to do, and he's always trying to poke one at me, trying to jibe me about stuff. I told him, I'm going to tell him how ugly you are. He's like, that's all right, wait till you get back home. So I told him today I was leaving. I said, I'm going to leave now. You got anything? He goes, good luck, have fun. He goes, I ain't telling the story. You're going to tell it, I ain't. But anyway, that's about all I have to say. I mean, I don't know if I've left anything out. I'm sure I probably have. But the whole story about Chad is in Carol's second book. And I'm more than happy to answer any questions anybody has. I'm sure there's a lot I've left out. And if you ask me a question about it, I probably remember the answer. But I get up here and get rattled trying to tell a story and forget half the stuff. And besides that, I think it's 4:30. So if anybody has any questions.
Sorry. Repeat the question when people ask the question.
Oh, okay.
Does Chad see the spirits of animals too, like pets that have died?
She asked if Chad ever sees the spirits of animals. To my knowledge, he's never seen the spirits of animals. He's seen spirits of people, mostly family members, that he's never met, but he knows who they are. Mostly my wife's family members, because she's mostly the one that people die.
He hasn't seen any evidence then that the animals do have spirits that continue?
I could ask him about that. Because he's a pretty open guy. But like I said, if he's not in the mood, he's like, what are you talking about? And then I might ask him one day, he's like, oh my God, you even believe what I saw today, Dad? Yeah.
Has Chad told you what his future is?
No, he's never gone into the future. It's always about the past. He asked me, has Chad ever asked, I forgot to repeat the question, he asked if Chad ever told what his future is. He's never mentioned anything about the future.
He's just going to hang out at home then, right?
He's a really unique kid. He only has like one friend that he actually talks to. Other than that, he's gotten off the rodeo thing. He's into wrestling. He loves like the wrestling federation, and he collects wrestlers. And he is content. There's not many kids like this. He's content to sit in a room with us or in his own room or anything else for hours on end to entertain himself. He's not a needy person that needs somebody else. He's real content just to be left to be himself. He's not, he's 14 and he's just, oh, she said, why did you bring him? I can't get him out of his room unless I promise to feed him. He is so content to be at home. If I take him out somewhere, like we go to the mall, I'm not even at the mall yet, and he's like, Dad, we done been gone a half an hour. He wants to go back home. He's content to be in his own little world. It's like he's in his own world that we're not a part of. And you really see it in him too when you get to know him, that he's a perfectly happy kid just to be left to himself. Yeah, he's not into coming out here, I'm telling you.
Has Chad ever expressed anything negative or in terms of the pain of the death passage or transition?
She asked me if Chad's ever expressed any negative or pain or, to tell you the truth, no, he's pretty content with everything. He's a matter of fact about things. He's a matter of fact. So-and-so's gonna die next week. I got one story for you, this is a good one. This is how smart this kid is. He went to his uncle one day and told his uncle, he goes, I think it was Thanksgiving, we used to have Thanksgiving dinner together. And he told his uncle, he said, you know, Uncle, he said, it's a shame you're not going to be here next Thanksgiving. And he knows about all these, like, oh my God, what'd you see? He goes, well, I didn't really want to tell you because I thought I'd give you a heads up, you got less than a year to go. He's freaking out, my uncle is. He's like, oh my God. It's Chad's uncle, I'm sorry, it's my brother-in-law. And then Chad starts laughing, he goes, I was just kidding. But he had him going.
I'm curious about his birthday.
His birth date is, hold on, I'm his daddy, I know. 12/22. He was born 3 days before Christmas. Came home on Christmas Eve of '92. His sister was born in December also. December miles is fun. I was married 20 years ago, December 6th. I had a daughter on December 11th. I had another son on December 22nd. I got 2 more kids and Christmas on the 25th. I'm looking for credit card companies on Christmas.
How did your son survive school?
He's,
Question?
he said, how does he survive school or how's he doing school, I assume? He's, has issues with his sight. So if anybody in here knows about education, he's in a 504 plan it's like a disabilities issue, where they try to help him out by giving him like larger print paper, and they do things for him like let him out of class 5 minutes before everybody else, they're gonna get trampled going in the hall, and to take the stairs and things a certain way, because he has to like hold one rail of the stairs because he just can't see out of the left side. Other than that, smart-wise, he's a pretty good kid.
I was just gonna say, I think with children like this, we need to remember that they're in this life as the person that they come in as, how am I trying to say this? We can't bring back the past life they had and try to see them that way. They're unique in who they are born into this life. I don't know if I'm saying that right.
You're right, yeah.
You know, so you can't, you just have to let Chad be who Chad is, like
Exactly.
I Courtney, who I feel, and have evidence that she's my grandmother, so
Yeah.
I have to treat her like she's Courtney.
We,
And that's,
she says not to treat him as he was in a past life, but to accept him who he is now, right?
right, exactly.
And that's what we've always done. From the very beginning, we let Chad be Chad. And other than me trying to get a bond with him when he was younger, that he didn't want to bond with his dad because he thought his dad had stole his wife away, I had to sit down and explain to him that's not how it is. Once we get beyond that, me and Chad became a lot closer, and we never treated Chad like he was somebody else. We always let him be himself, and we never held him back. For anybody that has these experiences, don't ever hold your children back from saying what they want to say, and don't make any assumptions about what they're saying, because you never know what they really may be saying. And that something just jarred my memory. My daughter, I have a 12-year-old daughter, she's 12 now. We were going through all these things with Chad, because they're 2 years apart. When we were going through these things with Chad, we didn't pay much attention to her. But I mean, we pay attention, but not specifically about past life things. my daughter had these weird things, I don't know how weird it is, but we would find stuff in the car, all over her stroller, like apples, bags of cookies, food, canned food, in her stroller, in the car seat hidden, in her room, in her dresser, under her bed, all over the house, everywhere she went, we found food. I'm not that poor, I got food in the house. Okay, now this is when she was really young. I didn't understand it. I'm busy concentrating on the life Chad's dealing with. And the other thing about Jessica, she's a girl of course, every stroller she saw, she ran to the stroller and looked at the baby. I mean, like she just loved babies. Just phenomenal kid loving babies. And we didn't put two and two together. She's got food. I mean, I don't mean just every once in a while. I mean, every time she leaves the house, she had food with her. It didn't matter what it was, an apple, a can, and she ain't got a can opener for it to begin with. She's taking it with her everywhere we went. If we were just going to the store, you could bet that somewhere in the car, she got food hid in the car. I don't know how long it took us to figure this out. Well, I know it took till my daughter actually broke down with me. I mean, this went on for a couple of years where she was looking in every stroller in a mall, or if somebody's holding a baby, she would just run right up like it was her own baby and look at it and just smile and just walk away. Constantly. It's all she did was look at babies. I just thought she had a thing for babies. I thought she thought babies were cute. When she finally came to me one night, this was a real tearjerker for me. This almost brought tears out of my eyes to hear this from my own daughter. She was probably 5 or 6, and she goes, Dad, she goes, I just can't find her. I said, find who? And my wife was sitting on the other side of the couch, and Jess was sitting between us. She said, well, I left her to go to work one day. And she goes, I ain't never found her since. I'm like, what are you talking about? Of course, I should have known, since I've already got to go through all this with Chad for the last 3 or 4 years. I should have known what was going on. And it hit me pretty quick when she started crying. She said, Daddy, I went to work one day. I said, well, how did you go to work? She said, well, I drove to work. I said, well, who'd you leave? She goes, I left my baby there. I said, well, where'd you leave her? She said, well, I left her at home. She goes, I was just running to the store to get some food. And I got in a car accident. I never made it back home. And it dawned on me, like, well, hello, stupid. You've been listening to this story for the last 3 or 4 years from your own son. So I sat down and explained to her. I said, Jessica, I said, that was a long time ago. I said, that daughter of yours is okay. I said, she didn't starve to death waiting on you to come back. I said, somebody found her and took care of her. And I said, she's a grown woman now. I said, if she's still around. I said, I don't know how long ago this was. And you know, from that day forward, because this went on for years, the food thing and the looking at babies thing, and she broke down that one night on the couch and told me that story. And I explained to her, because I've been through therapy with Carol, I don't know how many times about Chad, about how to deal with him. So I kind of knew what to do with her. You know, to get her beyond that point, I had to explain to her, yeah, that happened, but that was a long time ago, and you're beyond all that now. This is a whole nother part of your life. And she was okay with that, and she never had a problem after that. The food, she never brought food again, and never really went crazy over babies anymore after that. She had an understanding then of what was going on and never bothered with it anymore. Anybody else have a question?
Just wondering if either of the kids, that when they recall these past lives, did they ever give you a time frame, like as far as a year or location?
She said, did we ever get a time frame wrapped around all this? Our locations. And the only story, well, James and Chad, of course, knew what years that was. He even went so far with James to know exactly what the apartment looked like they lived in. And him and my wife, I guess, when he was small, they went to a park every day together. Because she knew, when she found out he was sick, she stayed with him like constantly, nonstop. And they would go to a park and sit together every day. He knew the exact park they went to, the exact toys he had. And then the only other thing related to locations or times is when he knew, like I said before, he could even know what city he lived in. He knew what Hawaii was. He even knew that Hawaii was made out of volcanoes. He knew that the island of Hawaii was volcanoes. He knew that you had to fly to get there. And that was, you know your own kids. You know if your own kid would know something about, about whatever. But at that age, I'm like, where are you getting that at? I said, no, you ain't old enough to even watch that on TV. You don't even pay attention to TV yet. But he knew those things. But other than that, we tried to narrow things down, but we couldn't. Because we got so far back as to when, like, he thought I was an intruder, intruding on his wife. And I had to explain to him, look, you're the son now, buddy, you're not the daddy no more. And he eventually got beyond that and we got a lot closer after that. Because he was really distant from me for a long time. I didn't understand why. And then finally that story came out and it kind of made sense. Then I understood it.
Did he ever describe the between life period or the afterlife period to you?
Yes, he did. She asked me, did he ever describe the between life period? And see, like I said, if you'll ask me questions, I'll remember stories. I swear to God I will. He told me and my wife one time that he can remember going up in the sky and going through levels. And he said he could see people stuck at these levels. And he's spending his time telling them which way to go. Because he's on his way to heaven, and there's people stuck there. And he says that they're just kind of hanging out, not knowing where they're at. And it's kind of like, almost, I look back on it now thinking about it, how he sees them here on earth. He says he could see himself going up and going toward heaven. He actually, that reminds me of something else, he actually described to me and his mom one day what it was like to watch James die. He said he watched James die and he watched James's spirit leave his body and go up to heaven. He said, I was just in the presence watching that happen. Yeah.
Did you ever ask him why, if he was in heaven, why he chose to come back? Or could he answer that?
Did I ever ask him why he came back or why he left heaven to come back? I don't know that I specifically asked him that, but I almost know the answer. Every past life experience he's had has always been with his mom now. He's been with his mom several times. It's like they've been together through several lives. And my wife don't remember any of them. And a lot of situations he's been in has always been about her. He was her son before, and then he was her husband once, and he's like staying with her.
Also, I realize your children are young teenagers, but have they seen the TV show Ghost Whisperers? Or
I'm addicted to that show. She said, do I ever watch Ghost Whispers? My son, Chad, that's another weird thing. He will not watch any phenomenon type show on TV. He refuses to watch it. If he even sees it on the TV, if he sees me watching Ghost Whispers, I love that show, by the way. It just kills me every time I watch it. Something about that show almost makes me cry every time I see it. There's a certain point in that show that just tears me. I explained that to my wife. I said, hi, I said, there's something about this show that just tears me every time I watch it. But Chad, if he walks in a room and you have something like that on the TV, if he glances over and sees something and it's ghost or phenomenon, he'll leave the room. I don't understand why, but he'll leave the room. I guess he's got enough in his own room. But he won't sit and watch anything like that on TV. And we've actually had him sit down. We tell him. Well, matter of fact, I was just telling Diane earlier that for those of you we've been talking about Carol Pullman all day, Carol was on TV last month. I was watching Discovery Channel, this kid show about what I'm talking about, and I find it interesting. So I flipped on the show. I said, hey, honey, I said, there's a show on about kids like Chad, and come here and sit down and watch it with me. I've been watching about 5 minutes, and Carol pops up on TV. I said, check it out, there's Carol on TV. So we hollered at Chad. We said, hey, Chad, I said, there's Carol. He's like, so? Walks off the other. He don't care. He don't want to. I don't know what it is. He don't want to see it on television. He don't want to watch it, and I think it's because he lives it. He don't want any more parts of it, I guess. I'm not sure about that.
What is his fun?
His fun is sitting in his room playing with his wrestlers. And now, just recently, this past few months, he joined the Young Marines. If anybody knows what the Young Marines are, he's 14 years old. He joined the Young Marines. He loves the Young Marines. And he has very few friends. He likes to sit and just be left alone. He'll come out of his room at night, like me and my wife in the living room, he'll come out of his room and say hi and tell me what's going on in his life. He goes, all right, I'll see you later. He'll walk back in his room. He'll come back about an hour later, tell me another story. All right, I'll see you later. We'll come back and visit sometime. And he's just real content about it. It's like he's a grown, mature person that don't need parents to be around him all the time. I mean, of course, we parent him, but he just don't need that constant attention that a lot of kids need. He don't need that, and he don't want that either. Like my daughter, oh my God, she's a drama queen. You gotta be on top of her all the time. My son, though, my youngest son, he's not into the wanting to be coddled and that's never been him. He's on his own all the time. Yes.
Does Chad have an interest in any musical instruments?
No. Did he have any interest in any music? No, he's not had any interest in music at all. And we've tried to, I try to tell him, do you want to do this? Do you want to do that? No. You've been gone 30 minutes, let's go back home. I mean, I don't get it sometimes, but yeah, he has his own interests.
Are you concerned that when he gets older, he's just gonna be very isolated?
He's not so much isolated in school. Like, he goes to every school dance they have. And I'm a chaperone. I chaperoned his dance last night, matter of fact. He goes, I mean, he's not, I know what you're saying, but he's not isolated like that where he just doesn't go around anybody. He doesn't have a problem at school. He goes to all the school functions. He goes to the Young Marines, which has a membership of about 50 kids that he goes with. He goes and does, he even actually goes out and to earn his ribbon in the Young Marines, he's doing community service work, volunteer work. I mean, it's not that it's just that when he's home, he likes to be home unless there's something specific he's got to do. He's like me, not liking shopping. If I'm going shopping, I'm going to get that, I'm going in, get it, get that. That's him. Or my wife could go for a loaf of bread and come back with a truckload. Well, Chad is like me. He just wants to go when he has to go, and then he wants to get back. It's like his little safe haven type thing. But then he does have his things that he'll do. Like he'll go out every week. He spends 2.5 hours a week with the Young Marines, with real Marine drill instructors, and loves it and can't wait to go back every week. And he, I mean, so he's not as isolated as I made it sound, but he does like to be at home, left alone.
I just wondered, my youngest daughter, who's the most psychic of all my children, needs a lot of downtime because when they're out, they're taking in so much more stimulus than a normal person.
You've got a point there, because like I was telling you, when he needs the downtime, because as she just said, he takes in so much stimulus from the world. Like my wife has tried to ask every day, she asks him, he comes out to the truck from school, and she said, Billy, she goes, I watch him every day. I'm at work, so I don't get to pick him up very often. But she goes, I watch him every day when he comes out of the building. Every single day, he's talking to himself, and ain't nobody within 10 feet of him, and he's laughing and giggling all the way to the truck. And she goes, when he gets in the truck, the first thing I do is ask him, who are you talking to? Nobody. You sure? No. What are you laughing about? Nothing. And he's like, he'll only let you in on what he wants to let you in on. But I know that there's a lot more to him than he says there is.
What is Josh's take on all this?
Oh my God, what is Josh's take on this? When Chad told Josh he was in the basement, two spirits walked right through him, Josh did go back in the basement about 6 months ago. He don't know what to think about it. Like today, Josh is 19 now, he'll be 20 in a couple months. He's got a job, graduated high school, he's doing really well. I told him, I said, well, I'm going today to do this little talk. And he said, oh, today's the day, huh? I said, yeah. He said, you didn't take no notes? I'm like, no, didn't take no notes. He goes, well, how do you do it? I said, I get there and start yakking. And he is accepting of it. He don't deny it. But when it comes to the personal things, when Chad, like Chad with his uncle, Chad can mess with him too. He'll say, yeah, I saw so-and-so in your room. You better get him out of there. You know, he's okay with it as long as you don't get him involved in it. Yes.
I'm a little confused about something you had said earlier, and you'll straighten it out, I'm sure.
Yeah, probably.
You mentioned that Chad watched James Spirit, and James was the kid with the neuroblastoma.
Exactly.
And so, but I thought he's a
I
reincarnation.
don't know.
Yeah, I had the same question. Yeah.
So what do you do? Fuse with James and come back as James?
Well, he obviously had been in past lives before James even. But he just says he could visualize, he watched James go to heaven. His question was, how is it that he could be James but see James die? And the question is, or the answer is, I don't know. He's had a lot more experiences than just James, which James is obviously his most profound one, which like rocked my wife's world. I mean, we didn't go through therapy, but I feel like I was a therapist, because she was like, how do I deal with this? I'm like, well, you were always so sad and destroyed. I mean, which I couldn't imagine losing a 2-year-old son. I would die. I told my wife, I said, I'd never function in society again when my kids died. I said, I don't know how parents do it. I couldn't do it. And she lost him, and then she's grieving him her whole life. It's not like she ever got over it. And then when this came to light, she just, oh, hello. I'm like, how do I deal with this? And she's asking me, what am I supposed to think? I'm like, I'm not a doctor, I don't know. She's like, what do you think? I'm like, I just take it as it is. I'm open-minded, I see what's there, it's my kid, and I know what I see, and I know what he says, and how do you tell him you're wrong? You can't tell him you're wrong. You'll tell you're crazy.
What would
So
he-
I don't know.
What would he do if you would ask him to explain, like, the thing about observing James and then being James?
Well, if he was in the mood, he would tell you everything he could. But you might catch him when it's like a spiritual, I don't know how to put it, it's like a spiritual realm that he's got to be in the right frame of mind, basically. That's what I'm trying to say.
Have you asked him to explain that?
Oh yeah, when he's in the mood, I ask him to explain a lot of things. But you got to wait for him. You can't go to him and say something. You have to wait for him to talk first. And then, like, the funny thing about him is when he's in that mood, that's not my kid. I mean, it's a totally different, mature, it's not a child talking to you. You can see the difference in him. It's not him. But then in the instant that he pops in and starts telling you a story, he might turn his head and come back, and then he's out of it. He just walks off, and you have to, like, what were you talking about? I don't know what I was talking about. He just, it comes and goes.
It's amazing, like multiple personalities.
Yeah, almost.
It's like in another dimension. What's the difference between heaven being up there or in another dimension?
She said, what's the difference between him being up there or down here in another dimension, right?
Heaven.
In heaven.
Heaven up there.
Right.
In our body.
He never really explained to me heaven. But the only explanation I got from the doctors is that he doesn't see an end. He don't see a beginning and he don't see an end. To him, everything is just one continuous life for him. That's why death doesn't scare him.
I mean, when our soul leaves our body, it doesn't go up, but it goes in like another dimension.
Well, he explained it as they go upward. Now, what they're going to, I haven't quite gotten out of it yet. Yeah.
I had a couple questions. Does he have an idea of what he wants to be when he's an adult? Does he plan on writing books?
Does he have any idea what he wants to do when he grows up? That's a good question, because I don't know. I don't think he doesn't contemplate tomorrow, I don't think. He's so easygoing. The kid don't get upset about nothing. My wife calls me this, and then we start calling him that. Have you ever watched Winnie the Pooh? Eeyore? My son's Eeyore. Your tail fell off. Can you put it back? No, don't bother. It'll just fall off again. That's Chad. Don't bother. It doesn't matter. Yeah.
I think when Chad answers Roland's question, I think Chad was young when he told us he's speaking in first person. Chad, who he is right now.
Right.
So that's what I was trying to say. They come in, but they're the person they are now.
Yeah.
Of course, he's saying, I saw James. Because he's speaking, he only knows he's Chad. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Right.
See, I have a hard time explaining this to us.
He doesn't have a timeline yet. He's
Yeah, that's what the doctor said. He has no timeline.
He's busy being who he is right now.
Yeah.
And like you said, when you catch him in another realm.
Yeah, you gotta catch him. It's like he's traveling through these dimensions, and you gotta catch him in the right one.
I really applaud you and your wife for allowing your children.
Well, at the beginning, she said she applauds me for allowing them to be the way they were. I'm like, what am I gonna say? What am I gonna do? Time to shut up? Well, yeah, you're probably right, but I'm always, like I said, I believe in God. I was raised in a Baptist church, and I never understood till I got older about, I didn't realize people had world wars over religion. I'm like, who cares what religion you are? I never would have thought about having a war over what somebody believed in, much less being closed-minded about something somebody's trying to tell you. I mean, I've always been pretty much open-minded. That's just me in general.
But they're not open-minded.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that aren't open-minded.
They will fight to the death about it.
Yeah. Well, when Chad started this, like I said, I've actually told this story in front of this audience about 5 years ago. I probably haven't told it this many times since then to this close friends. It's not something that just go up and meet somebody someday and say, oh, how you doing? My son's been reincarnated. My daughter used to have another life. You know, it don't work that way. I have, although through the years, I have met people, and I usually don't say anything. Somebody you know, I don't care who you are, especially anybody in this group, I guarantee you, you have come across somebody that says something to the effect, what do you think about reincarnation? Yeah, you think? I got a story for you. Come here. That's how the story usually comes out. And I will tell them. Yeah, go ahead.
When he's at school talking to himself and laughing to himself, are there people that don't understand, that think he has a problem?
I don't think anybody notices it.
Is there weird too?
Yeah, I've never had anybody come to us and say that they've noticed anything. I don't think it's like he's talking out loud talking. I think he just you can see his lips moving, he kind of laughs and chuckles to himself as he's walking. And I don't think anybody pays that close attention to him, to tell you the truth.
Years ago, there was a book and a movie very popular called The Three Faces of Eve. And it was multiple personalities in this girl called Eve. And there were three separate people. One was the homemaker, loyal, cooking and everything else. The other one was a sex pot, I think. And the third one was very religious. And these three personalities did not know about each other. Your son could have two personalities, and they don't know about each other. But I guess
He doesn't ever actually have an alter ego. I mean, he'll talk, and he has the same voice, the same hymn, but if you can ask him anything you want when he's in that other.
Well, that's the other personality kicking in.
He's.
And he doesn't know about the other one.
No.
Does he? Does he?
Yeah, he knows. Well, then again, he's aware of things now, but he's just, I don't care. Whatever. That's me. I'm sure I probably told you this part already. We had to explain to him that everybody don't see the ghost in the basement. Everybody don't see mom's mom standing in the room in the middle of the night. Everybody don't have stories about how your mom was your wife before. I mean, we had to explain that to him. And he finally understood it. And it's not like he makes a big deal out of it. He thinks everything he goes through is normal. He thinks he's as normal as the next guy. Yeah, spirits and
A question for both you and the other lady. With the nature versus nurture, I always thought it was 80% nurture, 20% nature, but I'm curious what you guys think about that, having kids.
I personally, I was thinking about this on the way up here for some reason.
Question, why don't you come up?
She was asking us what I think about nature versus nurture. And my opinion is, I'm not. I think it just depends on the kid. I've got a 26-year-old stepdaughter that I've raised since she was 6. I've been married 20 years. I've got 2 sons and a daughter. And if you could have opposite globes pointing 6 directions, that's the way my kids are. And they were all raised by the exact same parents, the exact same house, the exact same set of values and morals. And they're all so different. That's the question I would love to have an answer to. I was actually thinking about that today. Because how can you put a group of people in the same environment and end up with such different polar personalities is beyond me. I don't know what to tell you about that one.
The only thing I can think of is, I think when the kids come in with certain tendencies, personalities, agendas really for why they came here, I feel like you can mess it up more than, as long as as long as you're valuing those children, respecting them, kind of looking to them for cues for why are they here, and helping them, that's what a parent does, then I just think if you give yourself the glimmer that they have an agenda and how can I help them with their agenda, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of how I think about it in my head as opposed to like a percentage of nature and nurture. It's more like they're coming in with whatever they come in with and what do we do about it from there. So.
Well, from my view, I see that you're the anchor of these souls that came into this world, and what you give to them is the anchor, and what you get from them is the knowing.
Right. And I used to say to myself, why me? Why did I have to go?
They picked problems.
Yeah, who knows? Maybe because I'm so open-minded that I don't try to close them down, that's why.
That's
You're
it.
wonderful parents. It's great.
One thing I wanted to say real quick to the woman who was talking about this whole thing, I do healing work, and when you're doing healing work, you go into an altered state to help the person, to connect with them, and then afterwards, you really don't remember until you go back into that state. It's like you have to really get yourself to a place that isn't our usual busy running around
Right.
world. I mean, and I could totally understand how he could be in that place sometimes and other times just not. It's very, very common. So,
Do your children express any purpose in being here, any knowing of what their purpose is?
well, it's kind of interesting.
Would be the question.
I'm not sure if this is answering your question, but the question is, do they express any purpose for being here? When they were younger, they were very open spiritually and talked a lot about bringing love in the world, that sort of thing. Now they're older and have gone through life and school and all that. They're not quite as open about all that. My children are not quite as open as his son is. They're more, you know, they don't want to share it with everyone. But my son did say, I asked him once about his art, and he said, the reason I came back, I knew that in my previous life, I was very poor, and through my art, I became very rich and could do things that I needed to do. So I knew I had to remember my art. So I think that at some point, that will come into play. There was a reason for it. But they don't really talk about it. I think Diane's sneaking down, so I'm willing to answer questions afterward.
I just want to say one last thing, because I know Diane told us it is 5 o'clock.
Thanks so much for coming.